Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It's Geoff Mosher, Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds, and now we can officially say the NFL draft, it's less than a week away. We got a lot of great stuff coming up next week leading up to the draft. We'll continue to finish out our series with Greg Cosell going through each of the prospect groups, and of course with Sam Finkel going through each of the prospect groups from an analytics standpoint. Andrew DeCecco's big board. And then, of course, the long-awaited or much-anticipated, Adam, ITB annual first-round mock draft will all be coming out next week. And I'm excited, finally getting ready for this draft. We do this every year, and this is an important episode that we're about to do right now, where what we try to do around this time, we start to get a good idea of how we think the first-round board's going to fall and what those prospects are going to look like, that cluster, when you get to where the Eagles pick, which is a little harder this year because at 32, as you added, Adam, you know this as well as anybody. Yeah. You got a lot of prospects to get through and maybe some crazy trades that throw things off, and then the quarterback situation. Like, we can identify it, but it's certainly not an easy thing by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, clubs don't have no idea if you're picking late 20s. They couldn't tell you that they right. Now I will tell you that they do their own mock draft. They look at, believe this or not, there is analytical data on every team has their own. I know the Eagles do theirs, whatever their formula is, but they look at history of a position dropping. They'll look at teams will look at the history of a club and how they draft, how a general manager drafts, and they try to use all that data to come up with what this thing could look like. But turning this back to you, when you have 31 picks in front of you, you got to have scenarios, man. There's just right. The thing could blow up. The year that they wanted Brandon Cooks in 2014, we've talked about this over the years on Inside the Birds. The Eagles had 5 players they wanted. The board got blown up, and unfortunately, a trade that they had worked out with another team didn't work out. They were not planning on taking Marcus Smith unless they had to. He fit what they were looking for from a size and need position for. They ran a 34 under Billy Davis, and they wanted an edge rusher, but he was a guy they had a second round grade on. This happens sometimes when you can't trade out. You got to be careful. So that this is 11 years ago. So the Eagles have clearly learned from there to make sure you're ready for anything that could possibly happen.
That's right. And listen, for the purpose of this episode, fortunately for us, we're looking at this from an Eagles lens, and the Eagles have had stability with Howie Roseman, and I would say in the last 5 to 10 years or so, they have tendencies that they are open about and we know about, and we can use those tendencies to at least try to narrow down, and we'll give some names, guys who we think if at 32 really fit the profile for the Eagles, as opposed to just saying, hey, there's a lot of different guys. We think we've got a pretty good bead on what they look for based on the tendencies. The first one, Adam, we know, especially with first-round picks and at certain positions like D-line, the Eagles really value not just also production, but athletic scoring. The RAS, which is the relative athletic score of an athlete, you will notice when the Eagles pick in the first round, they often have a high mark on that, and especially if it's a defensive lineman or an edge rusher. If you've been paying attention to our series with Sam Finkel that goes through analytics, you know what the relative athletic score is. It's a combination of, some people think it's just your athleticism. That's a big part of it, but your measurements actually take into account. So you can run the greatest 40 in the world if you're a defensive lineman, but if you're 5'6", that's going to impact your score. So what we're going to do is look in again at 32, knowing what we know about RAS scoring and the Eagles, valuing of that, and the positional value, and in general what the Eagles' tendencies are, and go through some of the names here that we think and we expect will be in that 32 cluster.
Yeah, and also the most important thing is we have intel. We know who they've had in. We know how they fit scheme-wise. This is where we kind of set ourselves apart. We called the Jalen Reagor one 2 months before the draft in 2020. Unfortunately, I wish we didn't, but he's still playing though. Good for him. But the guy they should have drafted was Justin Jefferson. But I will tell you what, and you mentioned the RAS score. If you go back 21 to 4 drafts, it's not just the first round. There's a very big history of the RES score. Now we know what it is. We know that it's height, weight, 40, the 10, the 20, vertical, bench, short shuttle, 3-cone, hand size. It's then you project, okay, what is the history going back decades of these players based on their RES score becoming really good football players. Now, obviously, tape's always number one, but the RES score in the Eagles building, particularly with Alec Halaby, who's their assistant general manager, he's had a major say over the last 4 years. And major input. It's not his call, but he has major input. And we know Julian Lurie is a close friend of his, and they're relatively younger guys who believe in forward thinking. And you can't really fault the way that Howie's drafted for the most part in the last 4 years. He's drafted really well. He's done well, and it's obviously tape's very important, but the relative athletic score, the RAS score, clearly plays into it. Not every player, to be clear here, because
right.
I've gone through about 40 players that they've either signed or drafted over the last 4 years. Not everyone, like Kenny Gainwell, does not hit the RAS score well at all.
Right.
But that, as we first noted when he was drafted, that this is a player the coaches were very high on. And by the way, everyone who was involved in it was right. He did a good job. Yeah.
And we know someone like Cam Jurgens had a really high RAS score. He was, by the way, the highest you can get is 10. I think Cam tested over 9.5. He was really close. And the one thing you can't do is, I wouldn't suggest that you start Googling everybody's RAS score, because it's important for us to know that if you didn't run at the combine, if you didn't run at your pro day, if you didn't work out and that information is missing, then it's going to impact your score. They're not going to be able to weight it. And there are some players who are very good athletes that don't have an RAS score because the information is missing, and some who have low numbers than what they actually are because the information is missing. So we try to go off guys who have tested and we have all the information. But to your point, Adam, Cam Jurgens, big RAS score. Davion Taylor. Yeah. Davion Taylor had over an 8.5. And of course that didn't work out, but we know he was drafted because they thought he was going to be this great uber athlete who could play, third downs and passing linebacker and coverage and all that. And it just didn't work out for him.
Yeah, with Davion Taylor, this is where all the information is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty good kid, he was a late bloomer. Everything we said after that draft was he was overdrafted. He should have been drafted in the 5th or 6th round. Let him develop, and unfortunately, the other problem is he had kept getting hurt. I remember we had a note about, like, all of a sudden the lights started going on, and then he got hurt.
Yep.
And he just never became a player, but he was overdrafted. This is why you got to be careful with these athletic scores. This tape is by far the most important criteria, and then you adjust accordingly. But the cool thing is, particularly when clubs will tell us that if it's very even between between two players, if they have a similar grade, RAS score could be the tiebreaker, and more often than not, it's probably right with the RAS score. So you got to be careful with it, but it definitely helps. There's no question. The Eagles have been really good with it the last 4 years.
Right. And we've seen at certain positions that we'll get into, they really abide by it. And it has, for the most part, worked out for them. Obviously it has. They've got 2 Super Bowls and 3 appearances since 2017. And some pretty good drafts outside of 1 or 2 drafts that just don't look good. But they've even corrected mistakes since those drafts. So why don't we start with a look at offensive players at 32, that the Eagles would be eyeing, maybe some we know that they've talked to and have interest in. And we got to start with tight end, because you and I continue to see this the same way. It does not matter if Dallas Goedert is on the 53 or not, because even if it is, it's going to be his last year. And after Dallas Goedert, what do they have as far as a true a tight end who can give you blocking, give you catching, who can be a starter? No one, right? No one who can make the impact. And we know how important Goddard has been for the Eagles. You can call him the 3rd target or the 4th option behind the 2 receivers and Barkley. But if you look at the playoffs, there's no question he at times has been their most important offensive player in many big games, including Super Bowls. So, Adam, at 32, obviously the name Mason Taylor out of LSU has come up a lot, and I'm going to throw it out right now. A very good athletic tester, had an 8.8.
That's good.
4.68 40, 706 3-cone, 28 bench press. This is a guy that's going to appeal to them.
Couple things here. The Eagles have 7 tight ends on their 90-man roster. 5 will have their contracts expire after the season.
Wow.
The only two tight ends under contract past the season are E.J. Jenkins, who and Cam Latu. Now, I actually let me just double check this one.
Latu's an interesting one.
He's on a 1-year deal. Right? I'm sorry, he's on a 1-year deal. So,
right.
Yeah. So they can't line up past the season, and it draft is always about the future and with an eye on this season, hopefully. But the bottom line is, when you look at this situation, Taylor's a player. Mason Taylor's a player. Everything I've been told the last week should not get out of the second round. Now, when you talk, people have asked us this. He is a good, like if the Eagles are looking to trade out of 32. He now again, it's a draft where teams want to get out of the first round or trade back. But if they could find someone to trade back with, this would be a good guy to trade back for.
He would be. The issue is here. I've been told he's a top 45 prospect, which doesn't mean he's going to go in the top 45 because you never know what position is going to get overdrafted and force guys down. But when you're at 32 and then 64, do you want to, if this were the case where Tyler Warren's gone, Colson Loveland's gone, and Mason Taylor, if he's your next highest rated tight end, how far are you willing to move down and maybe lose him? Because you're not probably getting him at 64, and you don't want to move down and then move up. Do you want to move? Would you rather move up from 64 to like 50, or just move down maybe 1 or 2 spots? So it gets tricky there. It may get to a point where you feel like if you've got, say, Terrence Ferguson, another good tight end who also tested very well, and the Eagles have talked throughout the process. If you think that they're the same, then okay, maybe you just trade down a little bit and then you get Ferguson or Arroyo or somebody else. But if you really like Mason Taylor, and you think the blocking is going to be there and the usage is, then you might have to take him at 32.
Yeah, and that's the thing about trading down, because you don't know have access. Teams don't have access to other teams' draft boards, so you want to be careful. If he's your guy, go get him, and you don't worry about we had a little bit of a lower grade, but we know he's going to be our starter potentially if he stays healthy for the next 8 to 10 years. And by the way, Ferguson had a better RAS score than Taylor. Both are. So what I was told is pretty much 8.5 or higher is really good. 9s are really good, and 9.5 or above is ridiculously good. This is phenomenal. Terrence Ferguson, who's not expected to go as high as Taylor's, a better football player. His tape's better. Yep. But Ferguson's RAS score on all the testing, athletic testing, is a little bit higher at 9.32, and Taylor's is 8.89. Not that it means anything. It's tape first, but you like it if you're waiting a little bit to get Ferguson. Let's say the 3rd round. And if you could get him, that you like the upside, you like the tape, and he's got good athletic testing. So there's a lot of things that match up there.
Right. If there's an offensive player the Eagles move up for at the tight end position, it would have to be because either Warren or Colston Loveland slid. But Adam, everybody says trade up. I mean, 32, you don't trade up to like 24 without giving up a lot. That's 8 slots. I mean, they have to fall within a good realm, especially for a tight end, if the Eagles are going to give up like an extra 2 or an extra 3 to move up. I mean, I can't see that. I honestly can't see him doing it for a tight end, but they've surprised us before.
Well, it depends on what their grade is. If they have a true first round grade, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, but again,
that's true. Yeah.
Right. This is a draft. And we're not there yet with the first round grades, but your good draft is 16 to 18 first round grades. Your bad draft is like 6 to 8, and it varies by team. There's not one team that they all see it differently in terms of how they grade, because you're drafting by not only tape that every team gets, by all your security data, all your security information, injury history, how you evaluate it. We've talked about this for 8 years now.
Right.
For some reason, teams don't see injury information the same way. They have the same information, but they don't see it the same. I don't know the risk they see differently.
DK Metcalf, line 1, right?
Like DK Metcalf, right. Neck issue. The Eagles, they graded him lower. I mean, and the Seahawks got it right, although he's been traded. But yeah, that's so tight end right now with Goddard's future has nothing to do with this draft in terms of them drafting them. They need a future tight end, whether Goddard's on the team or not. Now, if Goddard is surprisingly not traded and he's still here, great. Then if the Eagles are able to get a tight end in this draft that could contribute, great. But bottom line is, you look at this team after the season, and honestly, if Goddard's traded, and you look at the rest of the tight ends they don't have a starter. They don't have anyone who could start right now if Goddard's gone.
Yeah, no. So at tight end, if we look at any other offensive positions, is there anything at 32 or a trade up that you can realistically envision that's worth our discussion here? I mean, I can't. Ashton, is Genty going to make it to anywhere near them, or I don't know, or a wide receiver, perhaps like a Luther Burden falls. But I almost feel like the Eagles would have to have these guys so much higher than other positions of future need for them that they would make that kind of a move. Really,
yeah,
tight end.
Yeah, certainly they're not trading. Luther Burden should go in the first round. I don't see him as would he be valued 32? Yeah. That's to me, if I'm Howie, I'm calling every team, if he's there at 32, because you look at AJ Brown he'll be here by contract structure. If you just look at his situation, the next time the Eagles have a decision to make would be 2027. You can't have Luther, and Devontae's going to be here a long time. So you can't make it work because the Eagles are not, based on what has happened, they're not going to be a heavy 11 personnel team in any way. That third guy's not getting the ball. You just can't justify it. So I'd be like, I get 10 people on the phone, call every team who needs a receiver. Let them trade it for Luther Burden. I think teams would call the Eagles at 32.
Sure.
There.
And like a year ago at this time, I would tell you, yeah, but you know what? Usually teams not going to trade into 32 for that fifth-year option unless you're getting a quarterback or a pass rusher. But lo and behold, the Carolina Panthers, who tend to do things differently, traded into 32 last year, I believe, right?
Shocker.
Xavier Legette. So it could happen.
Yeah, there was another receiver they liked, but they wound up backing off of him, I'm told. They just didn't have a good pre-draft interview. But yeah, that would be tight end. We've kind of covered it all there. So the number I was given. Now, again, every team is going to look at this differently. There are 7 tight ends you can make the case for. There'd be starters. Okay. Now, every team will have their opinion. Harold Fannin is really a fascinating discussion. His former head coach is now the Eagles quarterbacks coach, so they obviously have great intel. His numbers were one of the best in college football history in terms of targets and catches, but he's smaller than you'd like. He doesn't run as well as you would like based on tape study. Teams are all over the map with him. He's polarizing, if you want to say. Gunnar Helm, I know some teams think he could be a starter. He would come in as a 2. He wouldn't come in and start.
Right.
So he'd be part of that. Again, it's just the way, teams just don't look at this stuff the same way as other teams do.
That's right. I think you might could agree. If the Eagles really want to get that tight end, do it in the first, second, or early third, because after that, probably not coming home with a Dallas Goedert replacement. Let's transition to the defensive side of the ball. And this is where the RAS discussion, the relative athletic score discussion, is really going to kick in, Adam, because when you look at the Eagles, specifically what they draft in edges and in interior D-line, RAS is big for them. I went deep into the rabbit hole of RAS scoring for players that they've drafted at defensive tackle. And not surprisingly, we all know about Jordan Davis, right? Everybody knows he scored the perfect 10. He blew it up at the combine. And look what the Eagles did. They traded up and thought they were hoping that all of that would translate into a little bit better of a player at this point. Hasn't manifested, but that's not going to change their philosophy, because it's the same philosophy that made them pick Milton Williams in the 3rd round. This guy had a 9.96 RAS, right? And obviously that worked out really well for them.
And his tape, real quick, his college tape was fantastic. The knock on him, he had the shorter arms and the lower level of competition, but the tape was phenomenal. See, this is for guys who are not going in the first 2 rounds. It's very rare for the RAS and tape to match. They matched. Fantastic tape, elite athletic testing. By the way, really good dude.
Yep.
And he just got paid. So that just furthering that discussion, because you've used that term, which I like. 2 things can be right. Tom Donahoe was right about Lee McNeil.
Sure.
He was a terrific player. Now, before he tore his ACL, he got a huge contract, really good football player. So Howie and Donahoe were right. 2 things can be right. And Milt Williams with an almost perfect RES score with great college tape. That's a great job by Howie. Wow. And the Patriots paid handsomely for him.
Moro Ajomo is at an 8.8, which remember, he was a 6th-round pick. He's a little undersized. So again, your size counts to your RAS, but he's got upfield burst. He looks like a player who can at least be a nice contributor for them if he's not the starter moving forward. Fletcher Cox was over 9. I think was at 9, which is, again, really good.
Wow.
And Javon Hargrave was 8.3 coming out of South Carolina State, I believe it was.
Yep.
Well, that's pretty decent testing. And again, he wasn't a first-round pick. So when you look at this year's crop and we talk about 32, the guys that really jump out to me are the guys who are both productive, but also have good athletic testing. And I don't know, TJ Sanders just jumps off because of his 9.38 and the fact that he played in the SEC at South Carolina, big time college football there.
Yes. Oh, but Jomo was a 7th rounder, not a 6th rounder.
Oh, I'm sorry. 7th rounder on Jomo. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Great. I mean, so far they've gotten that right. He's got such a good build to play 3 technique.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I see it at 32 now, Walter Nolan, who we even heard they had in, tape outstanding. I don't have an RAS score for him. There was a character issue. Maybe that's why they brought him in for a visit.
Mm-hmm.
He's a fascinating study. If he made it to 32 or close to him, it's strictly because of any character issues that the clubs had with him.
Right.
He's one of the best D tackles for this draft. DerrickHarmon, good tape, good RAS score. Darius Alexander, you got to get over the fact that he's older. The Eagles have, I'm sure, some great intel because Nick Sirianni's good friends with his college coach, Jason Candle. Good RAS score. TJ Sanders, you mentioned, very high RAS score. Now, Alexander, late first, early second. DerrickHarmon, same thing, late first, early second. DJ Sanders, 2nd round. I don't see any way he goes in the 1st round. It would be really surprising me if he did.
Okay. Is that because you're just not getting that intel on him? Because I feel like this cluster is going to be like, the whole chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, whatever. You like. I personally got the most sort of positive feedback asking around on a guy like Harmon. I mean, the guy ran a sub 540, 495, and he played really high level. He had a really productive year. You remember Greg Cosell was talking about how a lot of these DTs look good and their tape's good, but when you go look at their production, I think Harmon had like 5.5 to 6 sacks. So it's a good combination there. I mean, I agree with you. I would think Harmon would go ahead of Sanders.
Yeah, the only one I don't see going in the 1st round, even have a chance, is TJ Sanders. Alexander, yet potentially. He's older. You got to get through that. Turns 25 this fall, I think. DerrickHarmon, again, late first, early second. Anything on? I know Tyleik Williams is a bigger dude. Anything on him?
Yeah, no. By the way, with Nolan, the reason why there's no score is because he did not test at the. He didn't test. He didn't do the stuff at the combine. He didn't do the stuff at the pro day. So there's just an absence of information. And the same thing with Tyleik Williams. I believe he did not do that too. And he's interesting, right? Because he's the oddly shapen defensive tackle where he's only like 6'2" or 6'3", but he's closer to 320, 330, right?
Yeah, he's a big dude. But so that would be. We'll move on here, but that's it for the good thing is D tackle is so deep. If you're a team that needs a D tackle, now obviously as you get there's more warts, so to speak. ShemarTurner's a guy who's going to go a little bit later. Is very talented.
Right.
When we did the show with Greg, when we did defensive tackles, I mean, we went over a lot of players. This is a good D tackle draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to handicap it again at 32 from an Eagles standpoint, Nolan, Harmon, Alexander, the likeliest in that trifecta there, if they're around, that would probably be an area where they really look. And if any one of them, would the Eagles trade up for Nolan maybe like 3 or 4 spots at him? Could you see that if he fell to like 28?
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. This is not really a draft to trade up, but there are extenuating circumstances. If a guy drops you were not expecting, you hear GMs always say that, oh, we weren't expecting the guy to be there. That's why you do it.
Right. All right. We've gotten some feedback. The Eagles really don't need to take an edge in the 1st round because now they've got, Jalix Hunt, and now they have obviously Nolan Smith, who's coming back from the injury, but they also signed Azeez Ojulari, and they also signed Josh Uche. And, Adam, we repeat this all the time. That's means nothing. Who they signed to free agent, unless it's like a 5-year deal or a 3-year
they're on 1-year
blockbuster.
deals.
Right. And even Bryce Huff, who did sign that blockbuster deal, is facing a very uncertain future at the moment.
Yeah, so the only guys who are sure to be here past this season are Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt.
Right.
Uche, 1-year deal. Ojulari, 1-year deal. Bryce Huff, because he was a bust for a year. He's still on the roster. That's it. O'Shawn Mathis, and KJ Henry are just on 1-year deals. So no, they need to figure out it. It's a need for the future. There's no question about that. It's now they get away with not drafting one early, sure, because you just mentioned the names. They could get by with what they have, but the problem is you don't ever want to settle. Huff is not a good fit for their scheme. Uche needs to revive his career. Ojulari he's got talent. He's done well in his career, but he's been hurt a lot. And Jalix Hunt, it's a pretty strong projection to think that he could start. I mean, he really closed well, but he's so far ahead of schedule. Do you want to rush it? So Nolan Smith has never been he just hasn't done it for a full season. Who for 3/4 of the season was great. So there are a lot of questions here at edge. Let's be honest, for the future. Let's be honest about it.
All right, so there's one edge prospect. I don't think he's going to be there at 32. I bet you probably don't think he's going to be there either, but he could. But if you're going to have that Jordan Davis flashback, but for an edge defender, it would be ShemarStewart from A&M, who literally set the combine on fire, 10.0. But here's the thing. You talk to Greg Cosell, you talk to other teams, right? And they question his actual production, and not just production, but like his refinement, his hand usage. As Greg described him, he's kind of like got all this speed and athleticism, but he doesn't really have a plan on how to rush the passer. You would wonder if the Eagles would take what they've learned from Jordan Davis or say, hey, who cares? Just because you don't get what you wanted out of one doesn't mean you apply that to everybody. It's an interesting conversation.
Well, here's the thing. If they drafted Stewart, they don't have to start him. They could bring him along slowly. Of course, that was their plan for Jalix Hunt, but
right,
you had the Huff injury and struggling play, and then BG got hurt, so he had to play, and he did a great job. Stewart might even be more raw. He's just RAS score. What's that?
It's hard to believe because he played at such a high level competition and playing at A&M and the SEC that he'd be more raw than Jalix Hunt.
I know, but
I get your point.
But man, the measurable 6'5", 267 at the combine, 34 1/8 inch arms, which are great. The wingspan ridiculous at 84 3/4.
Yep.
Now this is what I know. The 40 time really doesn't matter at all for edge rushers because the 10 is way more important. But it's still ridiculous. 4.59. That's a tight end. You'd be happy if you got a tight end who could run like that.
Heck yeah.
And his vert was 40. 40.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, if he was there at 32 and I'm Howie Roseman, I don't care what my past, issue with an app. I have a hard time saying no. And the fact that, as you just mentioned, I do have Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt and Ojulari, the fact that I have depth and I don't have to rush this guy on the field and I can coach him, oh boy, I'd have a tough time saying no. Because again, most of the time, that kind of stuff translates really well. If you just give this guy 35% more of a plan than he has now, you might get something really good. And then who knows what you get year 2 and year 3. But that's ShemarStewart. That's a story about him. I think if you put a gun to our heads, do you think he's there at 32? I would have some doubts about that.
That's more of a got to keep asking about him. That's, the last 6 days leading up to draft, we just keep getting more opinions.
I mean, my gut on just how much people love athletic edge rushers, that there's going to be someone just as tantalized as the Eagles.
Sure, it only takes one team. Yeah. You have to be willing to be patient. You have to expect what you saw on tape is where he's at. It's not like he's played a game since last season, so you have to just bet on the upside. And you're in a position, if you're general manager, that there's this is where job security is very important, that you're not worried if he doesn't contribute year 1. Because it's about the future. You're not worried about year 1. If he contributes, fantastic, but you're not expecting it.
Right. And also, real add to this, why he might go high. There's some questions about the other top edges in the draft. Like some people not sure where Jalen Walker from Georgia really projects. Is he an edge? Is he an off-ball linebacker? Michael Williams had an injury his last year at Georgia, and his production just wasn't there, even though the tape from 2 years ago is pretty good, and he's not the athlete that Shamar is. So you could see it happening. You could see him at 32. Let's go on to another guy who tested really well, James Pierce. What do you know about James Pierce?
Testing is fantastic. Tape is really intriguing. Are you okay with the football character and all that? There's some knocks on him. It's just a comfortability with it. This is why getting guys in for a pre-draft visit, no matter what the Rams say, you need to feel comfortable with a player. Because the Rams they don't do anything. They don't go to pro days. They don't go to the combine. They do very little in terms of scouting, in terms of travel. But Pierce 6'5 1/4, 245. He's got room to grow and put it mass on his frame. This is just 4.47 40, 156 10-yard split, which is more important. Now the vert was very disappointing. I don't know what to make of it. Anyone could have a bad vert at 31.
Yeah.
I don't worry about that. I know it shows lower body explosion. I get it, but you got to go by the tape. It's just a comfortability standpoint. He's going in the first round. I just couldn't tell you where, but he's. Didn't you ask Greg? I think we in the edge rusher show that we did with Greg. I think you were the one who brought it up about how would he fit as an Eagle, and he fit in real well.
Yes, he would fit. Greg thought he would fit the way they play their defensive edge rushers real well. He could stand up. He can go. He moves well. I mean, he's a great athlete, so he's going to move well back. Yep. The guys that are just the pure hand in the dirt guys in college, and I forget which one that was that we were talking about that you don't know are going to fit really well into the Eagles scheme. The other guy, Adam, that if he's there at 32, he seems to fulfill everything, and that's Landon Jackson. He has amazing testing. His RAS was 9.88, but he's also got great length. I mean, he was productive. He had good reps against Will Campbell, against LSU, the tackle who might go top 10, top 15. This to me is like a guy who screams, I could be an Eagle.
Yeah, and he fits by scheme. You could stand him up. He could play with his hand down. He's got great size, athleticism, 6'6", 264 at the combine. 33 1/4-inch arms, wingspan great, tested well, fairly well. 40 was 4.68. Again, I don't care about that. His vert was great, by the way, 40 1/2. What makes him not a first-round pick? I'm surprised that we're not hearing a lot on him as a first-round pick, but for Philly at 32, I think he's a day one starter. And I don't know what you wouldn't like about him. By the way, in nickel, he could probably move inside.
I love what you just said. I really don't know, based on the teams we've talked to, about what you wouldn't like about Landon Jackson. So it's because
Arkansas.
That is in the SEC. Last I checked. So.
I know it's like I don't know. I'm a little surprised, but that's it for edges. I think right now, again, we'll have more information next week. But these are a lot. There's something that would make some sense.
All right, let's go to inside linebacker. Nakobe Dean's got the injury. He's probably going to be out, maybe till mid-season, final year of his deal. We talked about this. If you lined up today, your starting linebackers are Zach Bond, Jeremiah Trotter, and your top guy off the bench is Dallas Gant. So this is an area that they have to address. Yeah.
Well, they have to add two guys. Now, they could wait till training camp. They don't have to do it now. Sure. But here's the problem. Van Sumeren is playing fullback.
Right.
So just available in OTAs when they start practicing after the draft. Bond, Trotter, and Gant. I mean, they could add obviously in the draft. We wouldn't expect anything till day 3 if they do it all. When they could sign a couple journeymen, they could patchwork it if they want to do it. It worked with what they did last season. To be honest with you, they didn't know that. Let's exclude Bond. That was a sort of an outlier. But when you look at it, they brought in Burks, and he turned out they didn't start off well, but he filled the role. He did a good job. He started. So yeah, you hate to say this patchwork because you don't want to have to do that, but if it doesn't work out for them in the draft, adding one there and adding one maybe as a UDFA like T.J. Edwards,
right,
who signed an extension by the way this week, they could wait, but they have to address it at some point because they can't line up. They just don't. You can't fill that ILB depth chart right now. They need to do something.
Correct. Now, with all that said, I just don't see this as the year where the streak breaks. I mean, there's too many strong D tackles, D edges, some cornerbacks that are all probably still going to be there for the Eagles to make that move to get. If it was going to be somebody, it would probably be Jod Campbell, who's got a 9.8 athletic testing score, or Schlesinger, who also tested really well. Smail Mondon out of Georgia with a 9.42. But I don't see it happening this year. Certainly not in the first. I can't see it at 32. I know that they've done some unconventional things lately, signing Zach Bond to all that money. They've drafted corners in the first and second round last year. They've done some things that they don't normally do, but I just don't see it.
No, and by the way, the kid that would be interesting if they shocked us and even drafted one in the second round. Demetrius Knight's really good.
South
Carolina.
South Carolina, right?
Yeah, he's really gifted. Yeah, he'd start. He'd start right away.
All right. Yeah, you're looking more. I would think day 3 at linebacker for the Eagles.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
All right, cornerback. Listen, someone's got to replace Darius Slay. So we've talked about the competition right now would be Adoree Jackson versus Keely Ringo. I guess Ricks is still in the mix, at least try to prove himself, but you can't rule out another corner being added early. Certainly at 32, there will be some pretty interesting names. And there are some really good athletic testers here. And again, Adam, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, awesome athletes. I mean, that was key to them in drafting those two guys.
You know what's interesting? Mitchell's athletic testing was way better than I thought.
Yeah, he really ran a great 40.
What's that?
He ran a great 40. Yeah,
he did. But everything that like his all of his athletic testing, his RAS scores is in the upper percentile. I was kind of surprised when I looked it up. But yeah, so right now, look, Trey Amos is a guy that I believe will be there at 32. He's certainly a top 40 guy. MaxwellHairston. He's over 5'11", tape's really good, explosive, RAS scores really high, 4.28 in the 40. That does matter. Great combine, more of a trade up. People ask about trading up. He's a guy I think you would trade up short. You don't have to go long. We're not talking about trading up to 15, but if a guy makes it pretty close, I think this is a guy they would trade up for.
Right. By the way, to your point, Mitchell and DeJean were both around 9.8, I believe, in the RAS score. Wow. So that just shows you they got some really good athletes there. Yep. Hairston is a guy. Did you mention Hairston or not?
That was who I just talked about.
Yeah, you just talked about him, right? That's what I thought. Really good. I've talked to a couple of teams that are pretty convinced he's going to be a first rounder. Now, again, that's what they think is going to happen because they have him as a first round talent, and they've said the testing is legit. I mean, they really like this guy. So if he's there at 32, the Eagles got to really think about this. I mean, that he would be. You slot him in there, and he probably beats out Ringo and Adoree Jackson.
I laughed at people were saying last spring, oh, well, they're going to start off Mitchell as a backup. I don't know where people came up with that stuff. First round pick, unless it's a situation like Jordan Davis, somebody's totally raw, you don't want to rush it, the guy's going to start. You expect him. You go with the expectation he will start day one.
Right.
So they started Mitchell off like you do a lot of players who come from small schools. You start him with the threes. He worked his way up. It was second week of training camp. I was like, okay, this is over. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's probably over before that. But anyway, so Amos and Hairston are two guys to look at 32 or around there.
Yeah, I think Siobhan Ravel out of East Carolina tested at 9.7 also.
His problem is come back from major injury, and that's I'll be interested to see where he goes, by the way. Very interesting to see where he goes.
Agreed. We saw a couple teams. Who took the chance on Caleb Farley a couple of years? That was the Titans.
Oh, that was bad. Yeah, feel bad for him. He's had the worst luck.
Yeah,
absolute worst luck.
All right, so at safety, this is going to be an interesting conversation because this might be the reverse logic because there's one safety that tested through the roof, but some of the feedback I've gotten, I believe you have too, is that there are teams that don't love safeties being a little too big, right? Some team Cam Chancellor was great for the Seahawks. He was built like a linebacker, but I looked into Vic Fangio's history of having good safeties, whether it's Dante Hittner, Eddie Jackson in Chicago. I said Hittner, it was really Whitner in San Francisco. Where else was he? In Justin Simmons he had in Denver. And
but he inherited him. It wasn't like they signed him.
He inherited him. But he wasn't big like Nick Amanwari, like 6'3", 225, 230 big. He was just a little bit bigger than some safeties. But generally, Vic's safeties, Adam, are in that 5'11" to 6, 185 to 205 range. Maybe more like 185 to 200. So I don't know if Nick Ammonwari is a guy that at 32 is going to make the Eagles say, yes, I need to have that because his athletic testing was amazing.
Well, yeah. The thing with safety, because you start thinking position change with guys when they're so long, 6'3" and 1/8, 220, 4.38 is just crazy. And his 10-yard split was 1.49, which is off the hook. But the thing that's crazier, his vertical at 43 and his broad jump is 11.6. This is, and by the way, he did this all the comic. Give him credit. I mean, for him to test there and not just do it as pro day or something. That shows he wants to compete. I don't see how he doesn't go in the first round. You are right on long safeties. Teams more often than not don't like tall safeties.
Right.
Their ability to flip their hips in transition. That's why you don't see a lot of tall safety or a lot of tall corners.
Right. I mean, look at who's flourished in Vic's system. Not just the guys I mentioned, but CJ Gardner-Johnson was really a converted safety from nickel. Right. So it seems like Vic and the way he uses DeJean would rather have somebody who has nickel safety hybrid than safety linebacker hybrid. So that's key. So we look at some of the guys, Xavier Watts from Notre Dame, a really, really productive player who didn't have a high RAS, maybe especially compared to the perfect 10 of Ammonwari. But this is the position that probably takes a little bit of a backseat compared to some others.
I agree. Credible production. It was not luck, his 2 years of leading college football in interceptions. They say, I know Greg laughs when people say he's around the ball. Well, Greg always says where's he supposed to be, which is comical, but it's true. The tape shows it. He's an act, as by the way, CJ Gardner-Johnson does for finding the football. He's just really good at it. It's very hard, by the way. We've talked about this for 8 years now. It's really difficult to find guys who are great finding the football, ball tracking. Greg, I remember when Greg talked about it, he said, be clear, I'm not saying he's Ed Reed, but he has the ability to see it before it happens. That is unbelievably rare. And this kid, Watts from Notre Dame, is got it, man. He's going to go. He won't go in the first, almost certainly, but his tape's good. Production's off the hook. The RAS score is not as high as you'd like, and that'll be a problem for some teams, I'm sure, for the Eagles. But he's a starter day one as a post safety. Bottom line.
Yeah. The question just is, can you get him at 64, or do you have to move
right?
Up?
Exactly. That's it.
Right.
Yep. Trade up. That's a trade up possibility in the second round. Again, the Eagles have. Remember that they're a lock pretty much to get a minimum of 3 compensatory picks. They could get the maximum of 4. It'll be close. I think they'll get it, which will give them 20 picks next year. You can't trade them. You can't trade the counts for next year because they haven't gotten them yet, but they know they're going to have them.
Right.
But anyway, so that's it for those draft picks.
All right, that's a lot of intel right there. And listen, there's a lot of names. We funneled it down here to about 10 or 12 that you should really have your eye on. And of course, we'll continue to monitor this and give you more information as the Eagles get even closer to the NFL draft next week. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in the Eagles intel. For Adam Caplan, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for watching and thanks for flying with us on Inside the Birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.